Some ideas cannot be unlearned. One of these killed Socrates, and the others decimate everything you assumed about yourself. Therefore, Second Brain presents 99 dark philosophical ideas that feel illegal to know. Let's begin. Plato's cave. You are almost certainly wrong about something central to your life, and you will defend it aggressively. Plato imagined prisoners chained in a cave since birth, facing a wall. Behind them, a fire throws shadows of objects onto that wall. The shadows are the only world they've ever known, so they name them, argue about them, build entire theories about them. One prisoner escapes, sees the blazing world outside, and comes back to tell the others. They don't thank him. They call him mad, and some want him dead. Picture the last time someone challenged a belief you'd held for years. Notice, you didn't calmly weigh the evidence. Your chest tightened. You started building a rebuttal before they'd finished speaking. That reflex is the chain. Here's the mechanic. Shadows are comfortable because they're shared. Your certainties were handed to you by family, nation, era, algorithm, and they cost you nothing to hold. Truth costs something. It costs the version of you that was wrong. This is why enlightenment is described as painful in the story. Sunlight burns eyes adapted to darkness. The escape hurts before it frees. Pick one belief you've never examined because everyone around you shares it. Examine it this week. The most dangerous illusions aren't the ones you doubt. They're the ones you've never thought to question. Memento Mori. You are going to die, and you are living as though you won't. The Stoics kept skulls on their desks. Roman generals had a servant whisper it into their ear during victory parades. Not to darken the moment, but to sharpen it. Because the moment you truly grasp that your time is finite and draining, the trivial falls away on its own. Picture the last conversation you had with someone you love. You gave it half your attention, phone in hand, already thinking about tomorrow. Now picture knowing it was the last one. Same conversation, completely different presence. Here's the mechanic. The mind treats time as infinite by default, so it spends it like it's worthless. Postponement feels free. There's always next year to fix the relationship, chase the work that matters, say the thing. Death is the only fact that makes the present non-refundable, and awareness of it converts wasted hours back into decisions. This is why the practice was never morbid. It's the most life-affirming idea ever put on paper. You don't contemplate death to feel small. You do it to stop sleepwalking. Ask what you'd change if this were your final year, then change one of those things this week. You will run out of time. That's the whole reason any of it matters. The ship of Theseus. There is no permanent you underneath all of this, and you've never once noticed it missing. Plutarch recorded the puzzle 2,000 years ago. A legendary ship is preserved in a harbour, and as each plank rots, it's replaced. Eventually, not one original plank remains. Is it the same ship? And if someone rebuilds the discarded planks, which one is real? Now look at a photograph of yourself as a child. Nearly every cell in that body has been replaced. The memories have been rewritten each time you recalled them. The beliefs, the voice, the fears, all swapped out plank by plank while you weren't watching. You share almost no material with that child. You just share a name and a story. Here's what makes it feel illegal to know. You keep searching for your true self, some fixed core to be authentic to. It isn't there. There is no plank that was never replaced. This is why the idea liberates instead of terrifying. If you are a process rather than a thing, you were never trapped as who you were. You're being rebuilt regardless. The only question is who's holding the hammer. Stop asking who you really are. Start choosing what gets built next. You are not a statue. You are a construction site. AMOR FATI. Not acceptance, not tolerance. Love. AMOR FATI means love of fate, and it asks something almost obscene. that you come to love the worst things that happen to you. Not because they were good, but because they are inseparable from whoever you now are. Nietzsche called it his formula for greatness. The Stoics practiced it daily. Picture the event you'd erase from your life if you could. The betrayal, the failure, the loss. Now trace forward from it. The resilience you have, the sharpness, the compassion for people going through the same thing. The door that only opened because another one slammed. Erase the event and you erase the person reading this. Here's the mechanic. Resentment toward the past is a war you cannot win, and it consumes energy that has nowhere to go. AMOR FATI ends the war by changing sides. You stop demanding a different history and start using the one you have. This is why it isn't passive. Wishing things were otherwise is passive. Saying yes to everything that made you, then building on it, is the most active stance available. Take your worst chapter. Name 3 things you have because of it. You cannot edit the past. You can decide whether to carry it as fuel or as debt. The absurd. You need meaning. The universe has none to give. That collision is your entire life. Camus called it the absurd, and he was precise about it. The absurd isn't the world being cruel. The world isn't cruel, it's silent. It's indifferent to your ambitions, your suffering, your death. The cruelty is entirely in the mismatch between how desperately you need a reason and how completely nothing is offering one. Picture yourself at 3 in the morning, awake, doing the math on your life. All of it. The career, the striving, the worry over things that will be forgotten within a generation. That vertigo you feel is not depression, it's clarity. Here's where most people flinch. They fill the silence with a borrowed answer, a doctrine, a distraction, or they let the silence crush them. Camus refused both. He called them philosophical suicide and physical suicide, and rejected each. This is why the third option matters. You stay. You keep your eyes open. You refuse both the false comfort and the despair, and you live anyway, fully, in open defiance of a universe that never asked you to. Stop waiting for the universe to explain itself. Build the meaning yourself and don't apologize for it. There is no answer. Live like that's permission, not a sentence. The happiness of Sisyphus. Sisyphus was condemned to roll a boulder up a mountain forever, watching it roll back down every single time. Camus ends his essay with 4 words that reorder everything. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Picture your Monday, the inbox that refills, the dishes that reappear, the same conversations, the same commute, the boulder that never stays up. Now, picture the moment Sisyphus walks back down the mountain, unburdened, seeing the whole valley, knowing exactly what awaits him and walking toward it anyway. Here's the mechanic. His punishment depends on his misery. The gods designed the torture, assuming he'd want the boulder to stay. The instant he stops needing the outcome and owns the act itself, the sentence loses its teeth. He is still condemned. He is no longer defeated. This is why the image is so dangerous to how you were taught to think. You were told meaning arrives at the summit, in the achievement, the arrival, the finish. Camus says it's available on the walk down, in full knowledge of futility, and it can't be taken from you. Find the repetition you resent most. Do it once this week as something you're choosing. The boulder isn't the punishment. Needing it to stay is. Eternal recurrence. Imagine a demon visits you tonight and tells you that you must live this exact life again, in every detail, infinitely. Every joy, every humiliation, every wasted Tuesday, on endless repeat, with no variation and no escape. Nietzsche didn't offer this as cosmology. He offered it as a blade. Your reaction is the diagnosis. Do you collapse in horror, or could you say yes? Picture your last week, replayed forever. The hours on a screen you can't remember. The conversation you avoided. The thing you keep saying you'll start. Now picture explaining to the demon that this is your eternity. Here's the mechanic. Most goals borrow their value from a future that never arrives. You endure now for later, permanently. Eternal recurrence removes later completely. If this repeats forever, then the only life you have is the one you're actually living right now in this exact way. This is why it cuts deeper than any productivity system. It doesn't ask what you want to achieve. It asks whether the way you spend an ordinary hour is something you'd sign up for eternally. Before your next decision, ask whether you'd will this moment to repeat forever. Then decide. A life worth repeating infinitely and a life lived well are the same life. The dichotomy of control. Almost every ounce of misery you carry comes from one confusion, mixing up what's yours and what isn't. Epictetus was born a slave and taught the sharpest freedom doctrine in history. 2 categories, and only 2. Yours. Your judgments, your choices, your responses, your effort. Not yours. Other people's opinions, outcomes, reputation, the past, the weather, your body's fate, whether it works out. Picture yourself replaying an argument at midnight, rehearsing what you should have said, imagining how they perceive you now. Every second of that spent on territory you do not own and never did. Here's the mechanic. The mind doesn't distinguish between influence and control, so it pours effort into the uncontrollable and then reads the failure as personal inadequacy. Anxiety is almost always the sensation of gripping something that was never in your hands. This is why the fix is not positive thinking. It's a border. When distress arrives, you sort it. Mine, act. Not mine, release, and return to what is. Next time you're distressed, name out loud which category it belongs to. Then act only inside your own. You cannot control what happens. You have complete authority over what you do about it. That was always the whole game. Negative visualization. Once a day, deliberately imagine losing everything you love. This sounds like a recipe for misery. It's the oldest known antidote to it. The Stoics called it premeditatio malorum, and it works on a flaw in your wiring. You cannot feel gratitude for anything you assume is permanent. Your health, the people in your house, your sight, your hands, all of it registers as furniture, invisible until removed. Picture the person you'd be devastated to lose. Now hold, for 60 seconds, the full weight of them being gone. The empty chair, the silence, the things you never said. Then open your eyes, and they're still here. Here's the mechanic. Hedonic adaptation guarantees that anything you keep becomes background. Negative visualization interrupts it by temporarily deleting what you have, so that its return lands as a gift instead of a given. Same life. Radically different experience of it. This is why it also armors you. What you've rehearsed cannot ambush you. Fortune loses its power to shock a mind that already looked at the worst without flinching. Once a day, spend 1 minute imagining a loss. Then look at what you still have. Gratitude isn't summoned by counting blessings. It's summoned by briefly losing them. The view from above. Marcus Aurelius ruled the known world and used a mental trick to keep it from swallowing him. He would rise in his mind, above his own body, then above Rome, then above the earth, until the empire was a dot and his crisis was invisible. Picture your current problem. Now leave the room and see the building, then the city, the lights going out one by one, then the continent, the curve of the planet, the darkness beyond. Somewhere down there is the email you've been dreading for 3 days. Here's the mechanic. Emotional intensity is a function of proximity. The mind has no fixed scale, so whatever fills your attention feels like the size of the world. Deliberately changing altitude changes the felt size of the problem without changing a single fact about it. This is why it isn't denial. The email still needs answering. but you answer it as someone standing on a planet in an old universe, not as someone whose entire existence is a threatened reputation. When something feels enormous, zoom out 3 times: room, city, planet, then act. Nothing shrinks a crisis faster than remembering the actual size of things. Death is nothing to us. Epicurus made an argument about death so clean, it's almost irritating. Where death is, you are not. Where you are, death is not. So what exactly are you afraid of? Pain requires a subject. Loss requires someone to experience the absence. After death, there is no one home to suffer it. You will not be lying in the dark, missing your life. There will be no you to do the missing. Picture the time before you were born. Centuries of history you weren't present for, and not 1 second of it troubles you. You feel no grief about missing the fall of Rome. Epicurus points out that the future after you is symmetrical, and asks why only one direction terrifies you. Here's the mechanic. The mind cannot picture its own absence, so it smuggles itself in. When you imagine being dead, you imagine watching yourself be dead, trapped and aware. That's the fear. Not death, but a fictional version with you still inside it. This is why the antidote is precision. What you actually fear is dying and leaving things undone, and those fears have practical answers. The nothing afterward has no one to harm. Separate fear of death from fear of an unlived life. Only one is worth your energy. You will not be there for it. That was never a problem for anyone. The experience machine. There is a machine that will give you any experience you want. Perfect love, towering achievement, every pleasure, indistinguishable from real for the rest of your life. You float in a tank, you will never know. Plug in? Nozick built this in 1974 and almost nobody says yes. Sit with why, because it dismantles something you probably believe about yourself. Picture it honestly. Guaranteed bliss, no risk, no loss, no failure, forever. And something in you refuses. Something in you wants the harder, poorer, real thing. Here's the mechanic. You don't actually want the feeling of achievement. You want to have achieved. You don't want the sensation of being loved. You want to actually be loved by someone real who could have chosen otherwise. Pleasure was never the target. Contact with reality was. This is why it feels illegal to know. It means every philosophy that reduces life to maximizing good feelings is wrong about you, and it means the discomfort in your real life may be the price of it being real. Check what you're chasing. If it's the feeling rather than the thing, you're negotiating with the machine. You'd rather have a real life that hurts than a perfect one that's fake. That tells you what you actually value. The trolley problem. A runaway trolley will kill 5 people. Pull a lever and it diverts, killing 1. Almost everyone pulls it. Now, same 5, but to stop the trolley, you must shove a large stranger off a bridge onto the tracks. Almost nobody does it. Same arithmetic. 1 dies, 5 live. Your answer flipped anyway. Picture your hands in each version. In the first, cool metal, a mechanism, distance. In the second, the warmth of someone's back, their body weight, the moment they realize. Your body objects long before your reasoning gets a vote. Here's the mechanic. You have 2 moral systems and they don't agree. One runs consequences and outputs numbers. The other runs ancient rules about using a person as an object, and it responds to touch, proximity, and intention. The trolley problem isn't a puzzle about trolleys. It's a device for catching those 2 systems disagreeing in public. This is why the honest conclusion is uncomfortable. Neither system is automatically the correct one, and you were taught to trust whichever happens to be louder in the moment. When your gut and your reasoning conflict, stop and interrogate both, especially the confident one. You don't discover your morality, you discover which of your moralities got there first. The veil of ignorance. Rawls proposed a test that makes hypocrisy almost impossible. Design the rules of society, but you won't know which person in it you'll be. Rich or poor, healthy or sick, powerful or powerless, any race, any body, any century. Then choose. Notice what happens to your politics behind that veil. Almost everyone gets more careful about the floor because they might land on it. Picture defending a rule you currently support while knowing there's a real chance you'll be the person it grinds down. Suddenly you want protections you never argued for. Suddenly the risk is personal. Here's the mechanic. Your sense of fairness is quietly contaminated by knowing your own position. You have a lifetime of practice in constructing principled arguments for systems that happen to reward people like you. The veil doesn't make you moral. It removes the incentive to be strategic. This is why it works as a personal tool, not just political theory. It cuts through self-interest by deleting the information self-interest runs on. Before judging any arrangement, ask what you'd accept if you didn't know which side you'd be on. Justice is what you'd choose if you couldn't rig it in your favor. The ring of GYGES. Plato tells of a shepherd who finds a ring that makes him invisible. Within days, he's seduced the queen, killed the king, and taken the throne. No punishment is possible, so no restraint appears. The question Glaucon puts to Socrates is brutal. Is anyone actually just, or are we all just visible? Picture yourself with a ring for 1 week. Total invisibility, 0 consequences, no record. Be specific about what you'd do. That list is a more accurate portrait of your morality than anything you'd say out loud. Here's the mechanic. Most behavior is regulated by audience, not principle. Reputation, law, and social cost do the work we credit to character. Remove the watchers, and you find out how much of your goodness was infrastructure. This is why the answer matters more than it seems. If your integrity is only enforced from outside, it isn't integrity, it's compliance, and it will fail the moment the lights go out. Real character is what survives invisibility. Do one right thing this week that nobody will ever know about. Then notice how it feels. Character isn't what you do when you're watched. It's what's left when nobody is. The noble lie. Plato argued that a well-run society needs a founding myth, a lie the rulers know is false, and the people believe is sacred, because the truth would be too corrosive to hold everyone together. Sit with the implication. Somewhere, someone decided you'd function better believing something untrue. Picture the stories you were raised on about your country, your family, your own past. Some were simplified, some were sanded down, some were invented outright to make an unbearable fact bearable, and they worked, which is precisely why nobody corrected them. Here's the mechanic. Societies and families run on shared fictions because coordination is easier than accuracy. The myth isn't maintained by conspiracy. It's maintained by everyone's quiet preference not to look. Anyone who names the lie is punished, not for lying, but for costing everyone their comfort. This is why the idea feels illegal. Once you accept that noble lies exist, you have to ask which of your own certainties are load-bearing fictions you were handed, and whether you'd actually want to know. Pick one story you've never questioned, because questioning it would cost you something. Sit with that cost, honestly. The most protected beliefs aren't the ones best supported. They're the ones holding something up. The unexamined life. Socrates stood before a jury that could kill him and refused to stop philosophizing, saying the unexamined life is not worth living. They killed him for it. Not a bad life, not a poor life, not worth living. That's how strong the claim is. Picture your last ordinary day, hour by hour. Now try to name which of those hours reflected an actual decision you made about how to live, versus inherited default. What you ate, watched, wanted, worried about, aspired to. Ask where each of those came from. Most of it was installed, not chosen. Here's the mechanic. A life runs perfectly well on autopilot, which is exactly the danger. Nothing breaks, no alarm sounds. You can reach the end having executed a script written by your era, your family, and whatever held your attention, and never once have interrogated a single line of it. This is why Socrates treated examination as survival, not philosophy. An unexamined life still gets lived. It just gets lived by somebody else's programming. Take one belief you hold about how life should go, and trace where you got it. Keep it or drop it deliberately. The point isn't to doubt everything, it's to make sure someone's actually home. I know that I know nothing. The oracle called Socrates the wisest man in Greece. He went looking for someone wiser to disprove it, interviewed the experts, and found something worse than ignorance: certainty. They knew things they didn't know. He at least knew he didn't. That gap, he concluded, was the entire margin of his wisdom. Picture the most confident person in your last meeting. Now picture the most knowledgeable. Notice how often those aren't the same person and how much airtime the first one got. Here's the mechanic. Real understanding of any subject reveals its edges, its exceptions, its unresolved arguments. Shallow understanding shows none of that, so it feels complete. Confidence isn't a signal of knowledge. It's often a signal of not yet having found the boundaries. This is why intellectual humility is a competitive advantage, not a weakness. The person who can say, "I might be wrong about this," updates faster, gets corrected earlier, and stops walking into walls the certain ones keep hitting. In your next disagreement, say the words, "I might be wrong," and mean them. Watch what opens up. Wisdom doesn't start when you know things. It starts when you know which things you don't. The EUTHYPHRO dilemma. Socrates asks a question that has never stopped being dangerous. Are good things good because a god commands them? Or does a god command them because they're good? Take the first branch. If goodness is whatever is commanded, then morality is arbitrary. Cruelty could have been holy if the order had been different, and calling the commander good means nothing more than saying he agrees with himself. Take the second. If things are good independently, and a god commands them because they're good, then goodness stands on its own foundation, and you can reason your way to it without needing the command at all. Picture any moral rule you follow because you were told to follow it. Now ask which branch you're standing on. Either the rule is arbitrary, or it's justifiable on its own, in which case the authority was never the reason. Here's the mechanic. This dilemma isn't only about religion, it runs on every authority. The state, the boss, the tradition, the crowd. Anytime you accept "because I said so" as the ground of right and wrong, the same fork appears underneath you. Take one rule you obey out of deference. Find the actual reason for it, or admit there isn't one. Authority can tell you what's expected. It can't make something good by saying it. AKRASIA. You know exactly what to do. You've known for months. You're not doing it. The Greeks had a word for this and treated it as a genuine philosophical scandal. AKRASIA, acting against your own better judgment. Socrates thought it was impossible, arguing that anyone who truly knew the good would do it, so failure must be ignorance. Aristotle disagreed, and Aristotle was right, because you have direct evidence in your own life every single day. Picture yourself last night. You knew the phone was costing you the morning. You had already concluded, in full clarity, that you should sleep. You watched yourself keep scrolling with the decision already made. Here's the mechanic. Knowing and doing run on separate systems. Judgment is slow, verbal, future-facing. Action is driven by whatever is immediate, vivid, and effortless. The present has a physical advantage over the future, so the future loses even when it's obviously right. This is why more information never fixes it. You don't have a knowledge problem, you have a design problem, and design problems are solved with structure, not resolve. Stop trying to want it more. Change the setup so the right action is the easy one. You already know, knowing was never the bottleneck. EUDAIMONIA. You've been chasing the wrong target your whole life, and the Greeks would find your version of happiness embarrassing. Eudaimonia is usually translated as happiness, and the translation is a disaster. It doesn't mean feeling good. It means something closer to human flourishing, a life well lived, the state of a person functioning fully at what a human being can be. Aristotle's version can include pain, struggle, and sacrifice. Yours probably can't. Picture two lives. One is pleasant and empty, comfortable, entertained, nothing demanded, nothing built. The other is difficult and full, real work, real love, real responsibility, plenty of suffering. Almost everyone recognizes the second as the better life while spending their actual days optimizing for the first. Here's the mechanic. Pleasure is a feeling, and feelings are fleeting by design. Flourishing is an activity, an ongoing exercise of your capacities towards something worth doing. One is a mood you chase and lose. The other is a way of operating that survives bad moods entirely. This is why the pursuit of happiness so often produces its opposite. You're hunting a sensation when the thing you actually want is a way of living. Stop asking whether you feel good. Ask whether you're becoming good at being a person. A flourishing life doesn't feel pleasant constantly. It feels like it counted. The golden mean. Every virtue you admire is a midpoint between two failures, and you're probably standing at one of the extremes calling it a principle. Aristotle's map is precise. Courage sits between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity between stinginess and wastefulness. Honesty between deceit and brutality. Confidence between self-loathing and arrogance. There is no virtue that isn't a balance point, and no extreme that's safe. Picture the trait you're proudest of. Now find its excess. The person who prides himself on directness is often just cruel. The one who prides herself on caution has often stopped living. Your greatest strength, pushed past its mean, is indistinguishable from a defect. Here's the mechanic. Extremes feel like conviction. They're simpler to hold, easier to defend, and they let you skip judgment entirely, because a rule requires no discernment. The mean demands you read each situation and calibrate, which is harder and cannot be automated. This is why Aristotle called practical wisdom the master virtue. The mean isn't a fixed midpoint you memorize. It moves with the circumstance, and only judgment finds it. Take the trait you're most proud of. Find where it curdles into a vice, and check which side you're on. Virtue isn't the opposite of a vice. It's the narrow ground between two of them. You are what you repeatedly do. You don't have a character. You have a set of repetitions that produced one, and they're still running. Aristotle's claim is mechanical, not motivational. Virtue is not a feeling you possess or a decision you make once. It's a disposition built by repeated action, the way a craftsman becomes skilled by making things badly until he doesn't. You become courageous by performing courageous acts before you feel brave. The feeling arrives after the practice, not before. Picture someone you'd call kind. They didn't decide to be kind. They performed thousands of small kindnesses until kindness became the path of least resistance in their nervous system. It stopped requiring a decision. Here's the mechanic. Identity is downstream of behavior, not upstream. You're waiting to feel disciplined before acting disciplined, waiting to feel confident before acting confident. The order is reversed. The action installs the trait. This is why waiting to become someone never works. There is no version of you that arrives fully formed and then behaves accordingly. The behaving is the arriving. Pick the trait you want. Do the smallest version of it today, badly, without waiting to feel it. You are not who you intend to be. You are what you did again yesterday. The categorical imperative. Kant found a single test that catches nearly every excuse you've ever made for yourself. Act only on the principle you could will to become a universal law. Not, would this be good for me? Not, would this work out? Would you want everyone, always, in your position, to do exactly this? Picture the last time you made an exception for yourself. The small lie, the cut corner, the promise you softened. Now universalize it. Everyone lies when it's convenient. Everyone breaks promises when they become inconvenient. Notice how fast the practice destroys itself. Lying only works because most people don't, which means your exception was parasitic on everyone else's honesty. Here's the mechanic. Immorality is almost always a special case you've quietly carved out for yourself. You endorse the rule in general and exempt yourself in particular, and you rarely notice doing it because the exemption feels justified from inside. This is why the test is so uncomfortable. It doesn't ask about consequences, which you can always argue about. It asks whether your reasoning survives being applied to everyone, including everyone doing it to you. Before acting, ask whether you'd want it to be a universal law. If not, you've found your exception. Every rationalization has the same shape. This is wrong, except when I do it. People as ends never means. Kant's second formulation is the most practical ethical sentence ever written. Never treat a person merely as a means to your ends. Note the word merely. You use people constantly, and that's fine. The barista is a means to coffee. The colleague is a means to a finished project. The line is crossed when the person becomes only that, when their own purposes stop registering as real. Picture a conversation you had this week where you were waiting for your turn to speak, managing them toward an outcome, treating their responses as obstacles or levers. Now picture how it felt the last time someone did that to you. You could feel it. People always can. Here's the mechanic. Humans detect instrumentalization with uncanny accuracy, even when they can't name it. It registers as coldness, as something being off, as not being seen. Every manipulation technique in existence is a violation of this one line, which is why they all eventually breed the same resentment. This is why Kant grounds dignity here. A person has purposes of their own, and those purposes have the same weight as yours, or the whole idea of morality collapses into preference. In your next interaction, find out what the other person actually wants. Treat it as real. Use people if you must, never only. Cogito ergo sum. Descartes decided to doubt everything. His senses could deceive him. His body might not exist. Mathematics might be planted. Then he hit bedrock and it held. He was doubting. And doubting requires a doubter. I think, therefore I am. Everything else can be an illusion. The existence of whatever is being fooled cannot. Picture trying to doubt your own existence right now. To do it, you have to be there doing it. The attempt refutes itself. It's the only claim in your entire mind that cannot be pried loose. Here's the mechanic. Certainty of the external world is inferential, built from evidence you can never step outside to verify. Certainty of your own awareness is direct, unmediated, immune. That is a strange asymmetry, and it means you're more sure of your mind than of the room you're sitting in. This is why it unnerved everyone. Descartes went looking for a foundation and found exactly one plank, and it only supports the thinker. Rebuilding the world from that single point turned out to be far harder than he promised. Notice today the difference between what you actually know and what you've merely never doubted. Everything is negotiable except the fact that someone is here reading this. The evil demon. Descartes proposed a demon of enormous power whose only purpose is to deceive you completely. The room, your body, the years behind you, this sentence, all fabricated, every memory installed, every sensation manufactured. Now try to disprove it. Any evidence you reach for arrives through the same channels the demon controls. Picture the most solid thing near you. The chair, your hands, the weight of your body. Every bit of that certainty is delivered by a system you cannot audit from outside. You've never once verified the world directly. You've only ever received reports. Here's the mechanic. You don't have access to reality. You have access to experience, and you infer reality from it. That inference is so seamless and so constant that you mistake it for direct contact, but there is a gap you cannot cross, and the demon lives in it. This is why the thought experiment refuses to die. It isn't a claim that you're deceived. It's a proof that you couldn't tell, which is a permanent and unfixable feature of being a mind. Hold your certainties a little more loosely. You've never inspected the source code. You can't prove the world is real. You can only notice you assumed it. The brain in a vat. The modern version cuts out the supernatural. Your brain sits in a nutrient vat, wired to a computer feeding it exactly the signals a body would send. Every sight, sound, and sensation generated. There is no room. There is no body. There's a jar. Test it. Pinch yourself, and the vat delivers a pinch. Look around, and it renders a room. Every experiment you devise is run inside the system you're trying to test. Picture the pressure of the floor against your feet right now. That signal is electrical either way. The nerve doesn't know the difference between a floor and a well-aimed current, and neither do you. Here's the mechanic. Your entire relationship with reality is mediated by signals arriving at a brain in the dark. You have never experienced the world. You have experienced a model your brain built from incoming data, and a sufficiently good fake data stream is indistinguishable from the real thing by definition. This is why the argument is unbeatable rather than merely clever. It doesn't say you're in a vat. It says the question is unanswerable from where you're standing. Notice that everything you call real is a model. Trust it, but know what it is. The world you experience is a construction. That's true whether or not there's a jar. The simulation argument. Bostrom's version isn't a wild idea. It's a piece of arithmetic, and that's what makes it unsettling. At least one of three things must be true. Civilizations almost always go extinct before they can simulate conscious minds. Or they can, and almost all of them choose not to. Or we are almost certainly inside one right now. The logic is simple. If simulating minds becomes possible, and any civilization runs many simulations, simulated observers vastly outnumber original ones. Ask which kind you are and the numbers give an uncomfortable answer. Picture how you'd detect it. You couldn't. A simulation running your physics would include your instruments, your doubts, and this exact paragraph. Here's the mechanic. You're not being asked to believe in a conspiracy. You're being shown that one of three claims must hold, and all three are strange. Either we don't make it, or everyone abstains, or your street is rendered. This is why it stopped being science fiction. It's a probability argument, and the discomfort isn't the sci-fi imagery. It's that the reasoning is hard to break. Hold reality lightly, then act as though it matters, because your experience is real either way. Whether or not the world is base reality, your choices inside it are the only ones you get. Solipsism. Only your mind certainly exists. Everything else, including every person you love, could be content within it. You can't refute this, not because it's likely, but because every possible refutation would be delivered by the very experience in question. Ask someone to prove they're conscious, and the proof arrives inside your mind, exactly like everything else. Picture the last person who made you laugh. You inferred their inner life from behavior. You've never once accessed it. You've had a lifetime of evidence and precisely zero direct contact with another consciousness. Here's the mechanic. You have first-person access to one mind and third-person access to all the others. That asymmetry never closes. Other people are, epistemically, extremely persuasive appearances, and the persuasion is all you'll ever get. This is why the honest response is not to believe it, but to notice what it reveals. Solipsism is unfalsifiable and useless. What matters is that your connection to everyone was always a leap, made continuously, without evidence, and made anyway. Treat other minds as real and precious precisely because you chose to, not because you proved it. You cannot prove anyone else is in there. Choosing to believe it is the most important thing you do. The problem of other minds. You've spent your whole life among bodies that behave as though someone's inside them, and you've never verified a single one. This is the sober version of solipsism. Nobody seriously doubts other people are conscious. The problem is that the belief is unprovable, and noticing that changes how you hold it. Picture explaining the color red to someone. You can point, measure the wavelength, compare it to blood and fire. What you cannot do is compare your experience of it to theirs. The private quality of your seeing has never left your skull and never will. Here's the mechanic. Consciousness has no external signature. Behavior, language, and brain scans are all correlates. You infer minds from similarity, reasoning that beings like you are probably lit up like you, and the inference is reasonable and permanently unconfirmable. This is why it should produce awe rather than paranoia. Every person you pass is, as far as you can prove, a sealed universe, and the leap you make to grant them one is the foundation of every decent thing you'll ever do. Look at a stranger today and register that there's a whole world in there you'll never enter. Everyone is unreachable. Reaching anyway is what love is. Philosophical zombies. Imagine a being physically identical to you, atom for atom. It talks, flinches, laughs, claims to feel things. Inside, nothing, no experience whatsoever. The lights are off and the machinery runs perfectly. Chalmers uses this to make a point about consciousness. If such a being is even conceivable, then experience is not automatically explained by physical structure. Something extra is going on, and physics, as we have it, doesn't obviously deliver it. Picture a system that reports pain convincingly, protects its damaged parts, and pleads for help, while feeling nothing at all. Now ask what exactly separates that from you, and notice you can only answer from the inside. Here's the mechanic. You can describe every neuron firing during an experience without touching the question of why it feels like anything. The full physical story seems to leave out the part you care about most. This is why the thought experiment matters beyond the seminar room. It's the sharpest way to see that consciousness, the one thing you're certain of, is the thing science has the least grip on. Notice that the most familiar fact about you is the least explained thing in the universe. You know you're in here. You cannot show it to anyone. The hard problem of consciousness. We can explain how the brain detects light, processes it, and produces the word red. What no one can explain is why any of that is accompanied by an experience. Chalmers named this the hard problem, and the name stuck because the contrast is so stark. Everything else about the mind is an engineering question. This one isn't clearly a question we know how to ask. Picture the taste of coffee this morning. Fully describe the chemistry, the receptors, the signals, the behavior. Now notice that the description is complete and still hasn't touched the taste. The taste was there. It's in no equation. Here's the mechanic. Physical explanation works by describing structure and function. Experience isn't obviously either. So a complete account of the machinery seems to leave a residue that the machinery doesn't predict, and that residue is the only thing you have direct access to. This is why serious people disagree violently about it. Some say it will dissolve with better neuroscience. Some say it's the deepest mystery there is. Nobody has closed it. Sit with the strangeness for a moment. You are the universe's one confirmed instance of it being like something to exist. Everything is explainable except the fact that any of it is being experienced. What is it like to be a bat? Nagel asks a question with no answer available to you. What is it like to be a bat, navigating by sonar? Not what it's like to imagine being a bat. Not what it's like for you, blindfolded, using clicks. What it's like from inside a creature whose primary picture of the world is built from echoes. Picture trying. You reach for something visual or spatial or a sound you know, and every attempt smuggles in human experience. You cannot get there because your imagination is made of your own materials. Here's the mechanic. Consciousness is essentially perspectival. There's something it's like to be a given creature, and that something is only accessible from that position. No amount of external description delivers it, which means there are facts about the universe permanently closed to you, not from lack of data, but from where you're standing. This is why the essay changed the field. It shows that a complete physical description of a bat or of a person leaves out the one thing that makes the subject a subject. Assume the inner worlds around you are stranger than your imagination can render, human ones included. There are truths you cannot reach, not because they're hidden, but because you aren't there. Mary's room. Mary is raised in a black and white room and becomes the world's leading expert on color vision. She knows every wavelength, every neuron, every physical fact about seeing red, complete and exhaustive. Then the door opens and she sees a red apple for the first time. Does she learn something new? Almost everyone says yes, which is a problem because she already knew every physical fact. If she learns something, then some facts aren't physical facts, and the complete scientific story of the world is missing a chapter. Picture describing a taste to someone who's never eaten. You can be exhaustive and still deliver nothing of the thing itself. Experience appears to be a kind of knowledge that cannot be transmitted, only undergone. Here's the mechanic. There's knowing about, and there's knowing. They're not degrees of the same thing. One arrives through description, the other only through being there, and no quantity of the first converts into the second. This is why the argument still bites decades later. Every attempt to explain away Mary's new knowledge has to explain away something everybody feels immediately. Stop confusing having read about something with having lived it. They're different categories. Some knowledge cannot be told to you. It has to happen to you. Determinism. If every event has a cause, and your decisions are events in a physical brain, then every choice you've ever made was the inevitable result of prior states you didn't choose. Your genes, unchosen. Your childhood, unchosen. Every experience that shaped the neurons that produce this exact thought, unchosen. Somewhere in there, where does the choosing get in? Picture your last big decision. Trace it back. The preference came from a value, which came from an experience, which came from a circumstance you didn't select. Follow any chain far enough, and it exits your control entirely. Here's the mechanic. The feeling of deciding is real, and it's also compatible with the outcome being fixed. You experience deliberation from the inside as open. From the outside, it may be a process with exactly one possible output, running to completion. This is why it's genuinely disturbing rather than academic. It doesn't say your choices don't matter. It says your choices are links in a chain that started long before you. Notice how little of what made you was up to you, and let that soften how you judge others. You were dealt everything, including the hand that plays the hand. Laplace's demon. Laplace imagined an intellect that knew the position and momentum of every particle in the universe. For such a mind, he said, the future and the past would be equally visible. Nothing uncertain, everything simply there. Under classical physics, that follows. If the present state plus the laws determine the next state, the whole timeline is fixed, and your entire life is already implicit in the arrangement of matter long before you existed. Picture your death. Under the demon's view, its date and manner are already entailed, not decided by fate, just implied by physics. Same for every word you'll say tomorrow. Here's the mechanic. Quantum mechanics complicated the picture with genuine randomness, but randomness is a poor rescue for free will. Being partly determined and partly random doesn't obviously make anything yours. Dice don't grant authorship. This is why the demon still haunts. The threat to freedom isn't a conspiracy or a god. It's just the idea that things follow from other things, which is the most reasonable belief available. Let it change your posture, not your effort. Act as the author while holding the question open. The universe may already contain your ending. You still have to walk through it. The illusion of free will. Libet wired people up and asked them to move a finger whenever they felt like it. noting the moment they became aware of the urge. The brain activity predicting the movement appeared before the reported awareness. Later studies pushed the lead time further. Your conscious experience of deciding looks in these findings like it arrives after the process has begun. Picture the sensation of choosing right now. It feels like the origin point. Libet's work suggests it may be closer to a notification, informing you of something already in motion. Here's the mechanic. The interpretation is fiercely contested, and the experiments have real limits. But even the modest reading is uncomfortable. Consciousness may be less the driver and more the press secretary, explaining decisions it didn't make in language that sounds like authorship. This is why it changes how you should treat your own certainty. If your sense of having decided can be generated after the fact, then your confident account of why you did something is not evidence of why you did it. Distrust your explanations of yourself. Watch your behavior instead. It's the better witness. The self that reports on your choices may be the last one to hear about them. Compatibilism. Here's the escape route, and it costs you something. Compatibilists argue that free will and determinism are both true because we've been defining freedom wrong. You don't need to be an uncaused cause. You need your actions to flow from your own desires, reasoning, and character without external coercion. A person choosing tea because they want tea is free. A person choosing tea at gunpoint isn't. That's the distinction that actually matters for responsibility, and it survives determinism intact. Picture the difference between being pushed and walking. Physically, both are caused. But one comes through you, and one happens to you, and every legal and moral system in history has tracked that difference rather than metaphysics. Here's the mechanic. The freedom you actually care about is authorship, not exemption from causation. You want your life to express who you are. That's available in a determined universe. What isn't available is a self that stands outside the causal order, and you probably never needed one. Stop demanding uncaused freedom. Build a character worth having your actions flow from. You may not be able to choose otherwise. You can still be the reason it happened. Moral luck. Two drivers text at the wheel. One arrives home. The other kills a child who stepped off a curb at the wrong second. Identical choice. Identical recklessness. One is a statistic, the other a monster, and the difference was entirely outside both of their control. Williams and Nagel called this moral luck, and it wrecks the tidy idea that we're judged only for what's up to us. Picture the near miss you've had. The moment you drifted, gambled, or got away with something. Your entire moral standing rested on a variable you never touched. Here's the mechanic. We assign blame by outcome while claiming to assign it by intention. Worse, the person you are is itself luck. Your temperament, your upbringing, the circumstances that never tested you. Someone with your genes in a harder life might have a criminal record and the same soul. This is why it should make you humble rather than cynical. The difference between you and someone you'd condemn may be circumstance and timing rather than character. Judge people knowing that your record is partly a matter of what never happened to you. You are not as good as your luck makes you look, and neither is anyone as bad. Existence precedes essence. A knife has an essence before it exists. Someone conceived of cutting, then made the blade to serve it. Purpose first, object second. Sartre's claim is that humans work the opposite way. You existed first. No blueprint, no built-in function, no assigned meaning. You arrived, and then the question of what you're for became yours to answer. Picture how much of your life you've spent trying to discover your purpose, as if it were buried somewhere waiting to be found. Sartre says, there's nothing to find. There's only something to make. Here's the mechanic. An essence given in advance would be a comfort and a cage. You'd have a right answer to aim at and someone else to blame for it. Without one, every excuse evaporates. You cannot fail to be what you were meant to be because you were never meant to be anything. This is why it lands as terror before it lands as freedom. Most people would rather be a knife. Stop searching for your purpose. Start building one and take the credit or the blame. You have no nature to live up to. That's the worst news and the best. Condemned to be free. Sartre chose the word condemned deliberately, not blessed with freedom, sentenced to it. You cannot stop choosing. Refusing to decide is a decision. Following orders is a choice to follow. Drifting is a choice to drift. There is no position you can take, including passivity, that isn't an exercise of your freedom and therefore your responsibility. Picture the situation you've been avoiding for months. You've told yourself you haven't decided yet. You have. You've chosen to stay in it, every day, repeatedly, and calling it indecision is a way of avoiding the authorship. Here's the mechanic. Freedom is exhausting because it's inescapable. Every excuse you reach for, my job, my upbringing, my circumstances, is itself something you're choosing to treat as decisive. The constraints are real. What you do inside them is not determined by them. This is why people flee it. Being told what to do is genuinely easier than being responsible for what you did, and most systems that dominate people are willingly entered. Name the thing you've been calling undecided. Admit you chose it. Then choose again, deliberately. Not deciding is the most common decision anyone makes. Bad faith. Sartre gives an example. A waiter moves too precisely, speaks a little too much like a waiter, performs the role with total commitment. He's not doing his job. He's hiding inside it. Bad faith is denying your own freedom by pretending to be a fixed thing. I'm just not a confident person. That's how I was raised. This is who I am. Each statement converts a choice into a fact and hands the responsibility to your own character, as if you'd received it in the mail. Picture the last time you said, I can't about something you'd simply decided not to attempt. That's it. That's the whole mechanism. Here's the mechanic. Bad faith is comfortable because it's true enough to be believable. You really do have a temperament, a history, constraints. The lie is treating them as walls when they're weather. You are always more free than the story you tell about yourself. This is why it's the central sin in existentialism. Not weakness, not failure, the self-deception that pretends you were never at the wheel. Catch yourself saying, that's just how I am. Replace it with, that's what I keep choosing. Every cage described as a personality has a door. Hell is other people. The line is famous and almost always misread. Sartre didn't mean other people are annoying. He meant something colder. Under someone else's gaze, you become an object in their world. They see you, judge you, fix you into a shape, and you cannot control that shape or step outside it to correct it. You experience yourself from inside as free and unfinished. They experience you as a thing with definite qualities, and you need them because you can't see yourself any other way. Picture walking into a room and feeling every eye register you. The self-consciousness that floods in is exactly this. You've just been converted from a subject into something being assessed. Here's the mechanic. Your identity is partly built from how others see you, which means you're permanently dependent on judgments you can't author. Sartre's hell in the play is three people locked in a room, each defined forever by the other two, with no mirror and no exit. This is why it isn't hatred of people. It's a description of the price of being seen. Notice when you're performing for a gaze rather than choosing. Then choose anyway. You need other people to be someone, which is why they can imprison you. The dizziness of freedom. Kierkegaard noticed something strange about standing at a great height. The fear isn't only of falling, it's a stranger fear underneath, that you could jump. He called anxiety the dizziness of freedom, not fear of a specific thing, which is ordinary fear, but the vertigo of realizing you could do anything at all, and nothing external will stop you. Picture the edge, Now locate the thought you don't like admitting. The awareness of possibility. You feel it as horror because it reveals that nothing in the universe is holding your arm. Here's the mechanic. Fear has an object and can be managed. Anxiety has none because it's produced by openness itself. Every possibility you haven't taken is a version of you that didn't happen, and you're the only one who declined it. This is why anxiety is not a malfunction in his account. It's the sensation of being a creature that could always have done otherwise. And the more freedom you have, the louder it gets. When anxiety arrives without an object, recognize it as the price of possibility, not a sign of danger. You're not afraid of falling. You're afraid you're the one holding you back from the edge. The leap of faith. Kierkegaard argued that the most important commitments in life cannot be justified in advance, and waiting for justification is itself a decision to abstain. You cannot prove a marriage will work before entering it. You cannot verify a calling before devoting years to it. You cannot establish that a person deserves your trust before extending some. The evidence you want only becomes available after the commitment you'd need it for. Picture the decision you've been researching for 2 years. More information hasn't moved you closer because the gap isn't informational. At some point, the leap is the only remaining move. Here's the mechanic. Certainty is available for trivial choices and unavailable for large ones. Because large choices change the person making them. The knowledge arrives inside the commitment, not before it, which means requiring proof first guarantees you never enter. This is why endless deliberation feels responsible and functions as avoidance. It's a way of never being wrong by never being anywhere. Identify the leap you've been gathering evidence to avoid. Take it or drop it, but stop pretending you're still deciding. The most important things in your life will never be provable beforehand. Being toward death. Heidegger argued that you cannot live authentically until you genuinely confront that you will die. Not as an abstract fact about mortals, as your own unavoidable coming. Everyone dies is a way of not saying it. That version keeps death general, statistical, happening to people. Being toward death means holding it as yours, non-transferable, and possible at any moment. Picture how differently you'd spend the next month if the ending were vivid rather than theoretical. Notice how many current concerns simply drop out of the calculation. Here's the mechanic. Without the horizon, everything looks equally important, so you default to whatever's loudest, which is usually other people's expectations. Death is the one boundary that forces prioritization, because it makes your time finite in a way you can feel rather than merely concede. This is why he treats it as the doorway to authenticity. Only a being that knows it's running out has any reason to ask what it actually wants to do with what's left. Make death specific and personal rather than general. Then look again at your calendar. You cannot live your own life until you accept your own ending. Thrownness. You were thrown into existence. That's Heidegger's word, and it's exact. You did not choose the century, the country, the language, the family, the body, the temperament, or the historical moment that produced your assumptions. You arrived mid-sentence in a conversation that started long before you and will continue after. Everything foundational about you was already set when you became capable of having preferences. Picture how different your beliefs, tastes, and values would be if you'd been thrown 300 years earlier or 4,000 miles east. Most of what feels like your considered position is a local accent. Here's the mechanic. Thrownness isn't a limitation on freedom. It's the situation freedom operates in. You never get a blank slate or a view from nowhere. You always start somewhere specific, with inherited equipment, and the only real choice is what you do from there. This is why it should reduce your certainty and increase your compassion. You're not the neutral observer of the world. You're a local product with opinions. Identify one belief that's yours only because of where you landed. Hold it more lightly. You began in the middle of a story you didn't start. The they. Who decided what a successful life looks like? What age you should be married? What counts as a respectable job? Which opinions are reasonable? Heidegger's answer is das Man, usually translated as the they. Not a person, not a group you could name. An anonymous, faceless authority made of everyone and nobody, whose standards you follow without ever having received an order. Picture the pressure you feel about where you should be in life by now. Now try to locate its source. There's no author. No one issued it. You absorbed it, and it governs you more effectively than any law. Here's the mechanic. The they is invisible precisely because it's everywhere. When everyone agrees, agreement stops looking like a position and starts looking like reality. Following it requires no decision, which is exactly why it escapes examination. This is why he considered it the default mode of human existence. Most people live their whole lives executing standards they never chose and could not name if asked. Find one standard you're chasing. Ask who set it. If the answer is nobody, decide whether to keep it. The most powerful authority in your life has no name and never gave an order. Master and slave morality. Nietzsche made a claim about the origin of your morals that is almost impossible to unhear. Master morality arises among the strong and confident. It calls good whatever is noble, powerful, capable, life-affirming, and calls bad whatever is weak and contemptible. Slave morality arises among the dominated. Unable to win, they perform a reversal. The strong become evil, and their own condition, humility, meekness, patience, restraint, becomes virtue. Picture the values you were praised for as a child. How many of them make a virtue out of not doing something, not taking, not wanting, not asserting? Now ask who benefits from those being virtues. Here's the mechanic. The reversal is genuinely clever and mostly unconscious. It converts inability into principle. I don't fail to take what I want. I am too good to take it. The powerless win a moral victory that changes nothing material. This is why it feels illegal to know. It doesn't prove your values are wrong. It asks whether some of them are dressed-up limitations, and that question is very hard to close. Examine one value you hold. Ask whether it's wisdom or a limitation you've promoted. Some virtues are chosen. Others are just weaknesses that got a better name. Ressentiment. Nietzsche kept the French word because no English one carried the flavor. Ressentiment is envy that has curdled and disguised itself as moral outrage. It's not simple jealousy. Simple jealousy knows it wants what the other has. Ressentiment cannot admit that, so it reroutes. The desire becomes a condemnation. I don't want what they have. What they have is corrupt. Picture the last time you felt a spike of contempt for someone's success. The critique arrived fully formed, righteous, and it felt like principle. Now check whether the identical behavior would have offended you from someone you liked. Here's the mechanic. The disguise is essential. Envy is humiliating to feel, and moral indignation is dignified. So the mind converts one into the other, and the result is a person who believes they're pursuing justice while running on wounded pride. This is why it's so destructive at scale. Ressentiment builds movements, careers, and entire identities out of tearing things down while sincerely believing itself noble. When outrage arrives instantly and feels good, check underneath it for envy. The most convincing moral fury is often just an appetite in a costume. The Übermensch. After declaring God dead, Nietzsche needed an answer to the emptiness left behind. His answer was a kind of person, not a doctrine. The Übermensch, the overman, is one who doesn't inherit values or wait to receive them, but creates them. Not a tyrant, not a Superman in a cape, but someone who has faced the absence of any cosmic guarantee and responded by legislating meaning for themselves and living it fully. Picture your own values. Now separate the ones you actually examined and chose from the ones you absorbed from family, nation, and era. For most people, the second pile is nearly everything. Here's the mechanic. Creating values is far harder than following them because there's no external validation available. You cannot check your answer. You have to affirm your own life without permission, which requires a self-trust most people never develop. This is why Nietzsche described him as a goal rather than a type of person walking around. It's a direction, not a category. Take one inherited value, either endorse it deliberately after examination, or replace it with one you defend. The alternative to obeying values is not chaos, it's authorship. The will to power. Nietzsche thought Schopenhauer and the hedonists both got the base drive wrong. It isn't survival, it isn't pleasure. It's the drive to grow, to overcome, to expand and exert capability. Notice that comfort doesn't satisfy you. Give a person total ease and they invent a challenge. The most contented people you know are not the ones with the fewest obstacles. They're the ones actively overcoming something. Picture the periods of your life you're proudest of. Almost none of them were comfortable. They were periods of expansion, difficulty met, capacity increased. The good feeling was a byproduct of growth, not of ease. Here's the mechanic. At its lowest, will to power is domination over others, which is what people assume he meant. At its highest, it's self-overcoming, power turned inward, the disciplined shaping of yourself into something greater than you were. Same drive, radically different expression. This is why hedonism fails as a life strategy. Optimizing for pleasure starves the drive that actually produces satisfaction. Stop optimizing for comfort. Pick something difficult that expands you and pursue it. You don't want to be comfortable. You want to be growing, and you've been misreading the signal. The last man. Nietzsche's warning wasn't a monster, it was something worse, a person who is perfectly content. The last man risks nothing, believes nothing strongly, aspires to nothing beyond comfort and mild entertainment. He has small pleasures for the day and small pleasures for the night. He avoids hardship, mocks ambition as naivety, and calls his own flatness wisdom. He is happy and he blinks. Picture a life of total ease, every need met, every discomfort engineered out, endless content, no struggle, no goal that could fail. Now notice that this is roughly what most modern systems are optimized to deliver, and that it's being described here as a catastrophe. Here's the mechanic. Without something worth suffering for, human capability atrophies. The last man doesn't collapse dramatically. He simply stops reaching, then builds a philosophy that makes reaching look foolish so he never has to notice. This is why the image stings. It's not a warning about tyranny. It's a warning about a fate you might choose voluntarily, comfortably, and call contentment. Find one thing you'd willingly suffer for. If nothing comes to mind, that's the finding. The danger isn't that life will break you, it's that it will make you comfortable enough to stop. Schopenhauer's will. Schopenhauer's picture is bleak and hard to refute from experience. Underneath everything, in you and in all of nature, is a blind striving he called will. Not intelligent, not aimed at anything, just endless wanting. Get what you want, and the satisfaction lasts moments before a new want appears. Fail, and you suffer. So life oscillates between pain of lacking and boredom of having, and the wanting never terminates because it was never about the object. Picture the last thing you were certain would satisfy you. You got it. Locate the satisfaction now. It's gone, and something new has taken the slot. Here's the mechanic. Desire is structurally unsatisfiable because its function isn't fulfillment, it's motion. Objects are interchangeable. The wanting persists and simply relocates, which is why acquisition never closes the loop. This is why his escapes were aesthetic contemplation and compassion. In art and in genuine concern for others, the wanting briefly quiets, and you get a moment outside the machine. Stop trying to satisfy the wanting. Notice it and find the activities where it goes quiet. You will never get enough of what you don't actually need. The porcupine dilemma. Schopenhauer tells of porcupines on a freezing day. They huddle for warmth and their quills wound each other, so they separate and begin to freeze. They shuttle back and forth until they find a tolerable middle distance, warm enough to survive, far enough not to bleed. That's human intimacy, exactly. Picture your closest relationship. Every real closeness you've had has included friction, irritation, and the specific injuries only someone close enough can inflict. And every retreat into distance has traded that pain for loneliness. Here's the mechanic. The quills aren't a flaw in the relationship. They're a feature of having a self. Two people with separate needs, histories, and appetites cannot occupy the same space frictionlessly. Solitude removes the wounds and delivers the cold. This is why the search for a painless relationship is a search for a shallow one. The distance that eliminates injury also eliminates warmth, and every couple is permanently negotiating the middle. Stop treating friction as evidence of a wrong relationship. Negotiate the distance instead. You cannot get warm without getting close enough to be hurt. Wu Wei. The Taoist idea of Wu Wei is usually translated as non-action, which is misleading. It's closer to action without forcing, moving with the grain of a situation rather than against it. Water doesn't fight the rock, it goes around, and given time, the rock loses. Wu Wei is the recognition that maximum effort is not the same as maximum effectiveness, and that a great deal of struggle is self-generated resistance. Picture trying to fall asleep. The harder you try, the more awake you become, or forcing a conversation, or straining for a word. Some things recede exactly in proportion to how hard you grasp. Here's the mechanic. Force works on some problems and actively breaks others. Anything involving flow, timing, creativity, or another person's willingness responds badly to strain. The skill is knowing which kind of problem you have, and most people apply force universally because effort feels virtuous. This is why mastery in any domain looks easy from the outside. The expert isn't trying harder. They've stopped fighting the material. Find where you're forcing. Try moving with the situation for a week instead of against it. Sometimes the fastest way through is to stop pushing. The Tao that cannot be named. The Tao Te Ching opens by admitting defeat. The Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. The first sentence of the book tells you the book can't do what it's about to attempt. Whatever is most fundamental cannot be captured in language, because naming a thing carves it out of everything else, and the deepest reality isn't a carved-out thing. Picture explaining the taste of water, or describing your love for someone in words that actually contain it. Language is a net, and the most important things pass through the holes. Here's the mechanic. Words work by dividing. This, not that. To name something is to draw a border, which is exactly why words are excellent for objects and useless for wholes. Anything unified resists description in a medium built from distinctions. This is why the tradition uses paradox, poetry, and silence, not to be mysterious, but because those are the tools that gesture without grasping. Notice where your explanations are replacing your experience. Then stop explaining and pay attention. The most important things in your life will never fit in a sentence. The uncarved block. The Taoists prize the image of Pu, the uncarved block, wood before the craftsman shapes it, not raw material awaiting improvement, but something valuable precisely because it hasn't been narrowed yet. Every carving is a subtraction. Make the block into a bowl and it can never be a chair. Specialization is capability purchased with possibility. Picture your own carving. Education, career, identity, the story you tell about who you are. Each step added competence and removed options. By middle age, most people are so precisely shaped, they can no longer imagine another form. Here's the mechanic. Culture rewards carving and never accounts for what was cut away. Expertise is real, and so is its cost, which is the flexibility, curiosity, and openness that only exists before the shape is set. This is why the tradition treats simplicity and beginner's mind as achievements rather than deficiencies. Returning toward the block is harder than being carved further. Take on something you're bad at, with no plan to master it. Practice being unshaped. Being finished is not the goal, it's the end of possibility. The empty boat. A man is rowing at dawn when another boat crashes into his. He erupts, shouting at the idiot who wasn't watching. Then he sees the boat is empty, drifting loose from its mooring. The rage evaporates instantly. Nothing about the collision changed. The damage is identical. Only the story changed, and the anger died with it. Picture your last flash of fury. Someone cut you off, ignored a message, said something careless. Now suppose you learned they were rushing to a hospital, or hadn't seen you, or were having the worst week of their life. Feel the anger drain, and notice that the event was always the same. Here's the mechanic. Anger requires an intention to be aimed at. It runs on a story about someone choosing to disregard you. Remove the intent, and the emotion has no fuel, because it was never about the impact. This is why the practice is to look for the empty boat. Most collisions in your life are drift, not attack. People are overwhelmingly busy, distracted, and inside their own difficulties, not thinking about you at all. Next time anger spikes, assume the boat is empty until proven otherwise. Your rage isn't caused by what happened. It's caused by who you decided did it. The butterfly dream. Zhuangzi dreamed he was a butterfly, drifting and content, with no awareness of being a man. Then he woke and could not determine whether he was a man who had dreamed of being a butterfly, or a butterfly now dreaming of being a man. He didn't resolve it. That's the point. Picture the last vivid dream you had. Inside it, it was completely real. You accepted absurdities without question, and your certainty was total. Only from outside did it become obviously a dream. Now ask what would look different from inside this one. Here's the mechanic. The sense of realness is generated internally and cannot verify itself. Every state feels like the waking state while you're in it. So the confidence you have right now is the same confidence you had last night, which turned out to prove nothing. This is why Zhuangzi leaves it open. The lesson isn't that life is a dream. It's that the categories you use to sort real from unreal are less stable than they feel. Hold your certainty about your own state lightly. It's a feeling, not a proof. You've been fully convinced by a dream before. You had no idea at the time. Anatta. Buddhism's most radical claim isn't about rebirth or karma. It's anatta, no self. Not that you don't exist, but that there's no permanent, unified essence at your center. Look for it directly. You find sensations, thoughts, memories, preferences, a body. You never find the one they belong to. The owner is inferred, never observed. Picture searching for yourself right now. Behind the eyes, that's just a sensation of pressure. In the thoughts, those change constantly and arrive unbidden. In the body, it's been replaced repeatedly. Every candidate is a component, never the possessor. Here's the mechanic. The self is a process the mind performs, not a thing it contains. Continuity of memory and narrative creates a convincing illusion of a fixed occupant, the way frames create a moving image. Useful, functional, and not the way it appears. This is why the teaching aims at relief rather than despair. Most suffering involves defending a self, its status, its story, its permanence. Noticing there's nothing solid to defend loosens the grip. Look for the self that's having your experience. Notice you can't find it and see what relaxes. There is experience. Finding the experiencer is the part that never works. Impermanence. Anicca is the observation that nothing whatsoever holds still. Not your body, your relationships, your moods, your city, your certainties. Everything is mid-process, including the things you're counting on. Picture the people you love. Every one of them is aging, changing, and finite. This exact configuration of your life, the specific people, the specific circumstances, exists only now and is already dissolving. Here's the mechanic. Suffering comes less from change than from expecting permanence. You form attachments to arrangements as though they were stable objects, then experience their normal transformation as betrayal. The pain isn't caused by impermanence, it's caused by surprise at impermanence. This is why the practice isn't detachment or coldness. It's holding things fully while knowing their nature. The parent who knows childhood is temporary is more present, not less. Awareness of ending intensifies rather than diminishes. This is also why grief is the price of admission. Every loss you'll suffer is proof you were attached to something real. Look at what you love and register that it's temporary. Then look again, more carefully. Nothing is yours to keep. That's what makes any of it worth holding. The second arrow. The Buddha's image is exact. If you're struck by an arrow, you feel pain. If you then shoot yourself with a second arrow, that pain is yours. The first arrow is what happened, the rejection, the illness, the loss. The second arrow is everything you do afterward, the replaying, the self-blame, the projection into a ruined future, the story about what it means about you. Picture a criticism you received. The remark took 4 seconds. Your response to it took 3 days. Count how much of the total suffering came from the arrow versus from your own hand. Here's the mechanic. Pain is an event with a duration. Suffering is a process you maintain. The mind treats rumination as processing, as if enough repetition will resolve the injury, but repetition mostly rehearses the wound and deepens the groove. This is why the practical instruction is so simple and so difficult. You cannot always avoid the first arrow. You can almost always decline the second. When something hurts, feel it. Then catch the moment you start reloading and stop. Most of your suffering arrives after the event, delivered by you. Maya. Maya in Vedanta is the appearance that conceals what's underneath. Not that the world is fake, but that what you take to be its final reality is a surface, and you've mistaken the surface for the whole. Picture a wave. It has a shape, a duration, a name, and it looks like a distinct thing. It is also nothing but ocean, temporarily arranged. The wave isn't an illusion. Believing it's separate from the water is. Here's the mechanic. The mind is built for boundaries. It carves continuous reality into objects because objects are useful, then forgets it did the carving. So you experience a world of separate things, including a separate you, and the separateness is the part that was added. This is why Maya isn't a claim that nothing matters. It's a claim about a category error. The wave is real, its independence is not. This is also where the tradition locates most suffering. A separate self in a world of separate things must defend itself constantly against everything it isn't. Look at something and try to find where it actually ends. Notice the border was yours. The world isn't an illusion. The lines you drew through it are. Tat Tvam Asi. 3 words from the Upanishads that claim to dissolve the deepest boundary you have. Tat Tvam Asi. That thou art. You are that. The self at your center and the ultimate reality of everything are not 2 things. Not connected, not similar. Identical. The wave and the ocean. Picture the boundary you feel between yourself and the rest of existence. It sits roughly at your skin. Inside, you. Outside, world. Now notice you're built entirely of borrowed atoms, running on borrowed energy, thinking in a borrowed language, and that the boundary is a permeable convenience rather than a wall. Here's the mechanic. The sense of separateness is functional and constructed, produced by having a single perspective and a body to maintain. The tradition claims that what's looking out through you is not a separate item in the universe, but the universe doing the looking. This is why the realization is described as relief rather than information. If you were never separate, you were never alone. and never truly threatened at the deepest level. Sit with the possibility that the boundary at your skin is a working assumption, not a fact. You are not a thing in the universe. You are the universe, briefly localized. INDRA'S net. The Buddhist image is a net stretching infinitely in all directions, with a jewel at every knot. Each jewel reflects every other jewel, and each reflection contains all the reflections endlessly. Nothing in the net has an independent existence. Every jewel is partly constituted by all the others. Picture the chair you're sitting on. It requires trees, rain, sun, the person who cut it, the machine that shaped it, the ship that carried it, the economy that priced it, the language you used to name it. Follow any thread, and it runs through everything. Here's the mechanic. Things look separate because we perceive edges, but nothing has a self-contained cause. Every object and every person is a temporary intersection of conditions, which means identity is relational rather than intrinsic. You are a knot, not a jewel sitting alone. This is why the image implies ethics rather than just metaphysics. If you're constituted by everything around you, harm and care don't travel outward from you to others. They circulate through a system you're part of. Trace one ordinary object back through everything that made it possible. Nothing exists by itself, including you. The middle way. The Buddha tried both ends before rejecting them. Palace luxury first, which numbed without satisfying. Then extreme asceticism, near starvation, which produced suffering without wisdom. Neither worked, and he noticed why. Both extremes are ways of not dealing with reality. Indulgence avoids discomfort by drowning it. Austerity avoids it by attacking the self that feels it. Each is a strategy for escape wearing a different costume. Picture how you handle stress. Some people numb, some people punish themselves with discipline and call it virtue. Both are moving away from the thing itself. Here's the mechanic. Extremes are attractive because they're simple and they feel like commitment. The middle way is harder because it requires ongoing judgment and offers no identity to hide inside. It's not moderation as blandness, it's precision without escape. This is why it applies far beyond spiritual practice. Overwork and total avoidance are the same maneuver, so are reckless spending and anxious hoarding. Find where you're at an extreme. Ask what you're avoiding by being there. Both ends of the spectrum are usually the same flight from the middle. Nihilism. Nihilism is the conclusion that nothing has inherent meaning, value, or purpose. Not a mood, an argument, and a strong one. If the universe has no author and no aim, then meaning isn't discovered in things because it isn't in things. Morality has no cosmic backing. Your achievements dissolve on a long enough timeline. Every civilization ends. The sun expands. Nothing that matters to you will matter later, because there will be no later observers to matter to. Picture the argument at full strength without flinching. Most people never do. They either refuse to look or they look and get stuck. Here's the mechanic. Nihilism is usually correct about what it denies and wrong about what follows. It correctly notes that meaning isn't a property of the universe. It then quietly assumes that meaning must be a property of the universe to count, which is the unexamined premise doing all the damage. This is why it functions as a checkpoint rather than a destination. Everyone honest passes through it. The question is whether you stop there. Let the argument land completely. Then ask why meaning would have to be external to be real. Nihilism is right that nothing means anything by itself. That was never where meaning lived. Optimistic nihilism. Take nihilism completely seriously, then notice it cuts both ways. If nothing has inherent meaning, then nothing has inherent meaning against you either. Your failures aren't cosmic verdicts. Your embarrassments aren't recorded anywhere. The standards you've been failing to meet were never handed down by the universe, which means they can be dropped, rewritten, or replaced. Picture the weight you carry about not having achieved enough by now. Now locate the authority that set the deadline. There isn't one. It was a story, and stories can be edited. Here's the mechanic. Nihilism removes cosmic purpose and cosmic judgment in the same stroke. Most people register the first loss and never claim the second gift. If the universe isn't grading you, then the only meaning available is the meaning you build with the people around you. And that meaning is real because it's the only kind there ever was. This is why the position ends up lighter rather than darker. Not nothing matters, so nothing is worth doing, but nothing is written, so choose well and stop apologizing. Drop one standard you never chose. Replace it with something you defend to your face. The universe isn't watching. That's terrifying for about a minute. Then it's freedom. Mimetic desire. You think your desires are yours. Girard argued that almost none of them are. His claim is that desire is imitative. You don't want objects because of their properties. You want them because someone else wants them, and their wanting makes the object appear valuable. Desire is triangular. You, the object, and the model whose desire taught you to want. Picture something you wanted intensely and then obtained, only to lose interest quickly. Now ask whether you were tracking the object or tracking someone else's admiration of it. Notice how often desire dies the moment nobody else is competing for the thing. Here's the mechanic. Because we imitate, we converge. Two people who want the same thing become rivals, and rivalry intensifies the wanting, which spreads to observers. Entire markets, feuds, and fashions run on this loop, and it feels from inside like personal preference. This is why it's so uncomfortable. It suggests your ambitions may have been installed by proximity, and that you might be spending your life competing for something you never independently wanted. Take one major goal. Ask who taught you to want it, and whether you'd still want it alone. Most of what you want, you caught from someone else. The scapegoat mechanism. Girard's second insight is darker. When mimetic rivalry saturates a group, tension builds toward violence, and the group discharges it by uniting against a single victim. The scapegoat is usually marginal enough to be attacked safely and connected enough to be plausible. Guilt is irrelevant. The function is not justice, it's relief. Once the victim is expelled, the group experiences genuine peace and mistakes that peace for proof that the victim was the problem. Picture a workplace, family, or online pile-on where the mood transformed the instant a target was found. The relief was real, the unity was real, the reasoning was assembled afterward. Here's the mechanic. Scapegoating works because it converts many-sided conflict into one-sided consensus. Everyone gets to be on the same side, and the underlying rivalries go unexamined because the cause has been named and removed. This is why it repeats endlessly. Nothing was fixed, so the pressure rebuilds, and a new victim becomes necessary. When a group turns on one person with sudden unity, look at what tension was there before. The peace that follows a pile-on is the strongest evidence that it was never about the target. The banality of evil. Arendt went to Jerusalem expecting a monster and found a bureaucrat. Eichmann, who organized transports to death camps, was not a fanatic or a sadist in her account. He was dull, careerist, concerned with promotion, fluent in cliches, and apparently unable to think from anyone else's position. His defense was that he was following orders and doing his job well. Her phrase, the banality of evil, was widely misread as excusing him. It wasn't. It was a much more disturbing claim that catastrophic harm doesn't require monstrous motives. It requires ordinary people who stop thinking. Picture the systems you participate in, the paperwork you process, the policy you enforce, the small role in a large machine. Almost nobody in any atrocity believed they were the villain. They believed they were being competent. Here's the mechanic. Distributed action removes the felt sense of authorship. Each participant does something defensible, and the aggregate is monstrous, with no single person feeling responsible for the whole. This is why she considered thoughtlessness the danger rather than malice. Ask what your role adds up to, not just whether your part was correct. Great evil rarely arrives as cruelty. It usually arrives as procedure. The Panopticon. Bentham designed a prison where a single guard in a central tower could see into every cell, while no prisoner could tell whether they were being watched at that moment. Foucault saw the design as a description of modern life. The genius is that the guard becomes unnecessary. Once uncertainty about observation is permanent, prisoners regulate themselves continuously, and power operates without being exercised. Picture how you behave differently when a camera might be on, a message might be screenshotted, a post might resurface in 10 years. You've internalized an audience that isn't confirmed to be present, and you obey it constantly. Here's the mechanic. Surveillance doesn't need to be actual to work. It needs to be possible. The subject then does the enforcing, which is cheaper, more thorough, and feels like personal choice rather than external control. This is why it's the most efficient form of power ever designed. Nobody has to threaten you. You threaten yourself on their behalf and call it prudence. Notice one behavior you modify for an audience that may not exist. Decide if you endorse it. The most effective cage is the one where you volunteer as the guard. Simulacra and simulation. Baudrillard traced a sequence. First, an image reflects reality, then it distorts reality, then it masks the absence of reality. Finally, it has no relation to reality at all and becomes its own thing, a copy with no original. Picture a photograph edited toward a beauty standard that came from previously edited photographs, referencing no actual face anywhere. Or a restaurant designed to look like a nostalgic diner that never existed. Or a political statement crafted to resemble authenticity, with no authentic position behind it. Here's the mechanic. Once representations start referencing other representations, the chain detaches from the world entirely. The map stops describing the territory and starts generating it, and people begin measuring reality against the copy, finding reality deficient. This is why he called it hyperreality, not fake, which would imply a real to compare against. Something stranger, more coherent, more vivid, and more persuasive than the thing it replaced. This is also why the effect isn't fixed by fact-checking. There's no original to return to. Ask of one thing you admire. Is it referencing reality or referencing other representations? The most convincing images in your life are copies of things that never existed. The Society of the Spectacle. Debord's claim, made in 1967, has aged into prophecy. In modern life, direct experience is progressively replaced by its representation, and social relationships become mediated by images. You don't have the experience, you have the documentation of it, and eventually you begin selecting experiences for their documentability. Picture a crowd at a concert holding phones, watching a screen showing what's 10 feet in front of them, or a meal photographed before tasted, or a trip planned around locations that photograph well. The spectacle isn't a set of images added to life. It's a relationship in which the image becomes the point. Here's the mechanic. Representation is easier to produce, share, and be validated for than experience. So attention migrates toward the version that can be shown, and the unshowable parts of life quietly lose funding. This is why it feels hollow without being obviously wrong. Nothing forbids you from living directly. The incentives simply all point the other way. Do one significant thing this week and document none of it. When everything is worth showing, very little is worth doing. The paradox of tolerance. Popper identified a trap with no clean exit. A perfectly tolerant society must tolerate intolerance. If it does so without limit, the intolerant will use that protection to dismantle tolerance itself. Unlimited tolerance therefore ends in its own destruction. Picture a group that openly intends to eliminate the freedoms it currently enjoys. Tolerate it fully, and you fund your own removal. Suppress it, and you've breached the principle you were defending. Here's the mechanic. Tolerance isn't a self-sustaining condition. It's an agreement that requires reciprocity, and it has no defense against a participant who accepts the protection while rejecting the obligation. Popper's own answer was narrower than most people quote. He argued against suppressing intolerant views while they can still be met with argument, and for intervention only when they refuse rational debate and turn to force or the suppression of others. This is why the paradox is genuinely hard rather than a slogan. Every proposed limit can be abused by whoever holds power, and every refusal to limit can be exploited. Notice when you're using a principle to protect its own destruction, and think carefully rather than reflexively. A commitment with no boundary is a commitment that can be used against you. Falsifiability. Popper found the line between science and pseudoscience, and it isn't evidence, it's risk. A scientific claim must specify what would prove it wrong. It must forbid something. If no observation could possibly contradict it, then no observation supports it either, however much it seems to fit. Picture a theory that accounts for every outcome. Whatever happens, it was predicted. Success confirms it, failure confirms it, the opposite of both confirms it. That flexibility feels like strength and is actually total emptiness. Here's the mechanic. Confirmation is cheap. Any vague framework accumulates supporting instances endlessly, because a claim that rules nothing out is compatible with everything. The only informative test is one the claim could fail. This is why the standard applies to your own beliefs, not just to laboratories. Ask what would change your mind on a topic. If you can't answer, you're not holding a conclusion, you're holding an identity. Take a belief you're confident about. Name the evidence that would refute it. A belief that nothing could disprove is telling you about yourself, not about the world. The problem of induction. Hume asked how you know the future will resemble the past, and nobody has satisfactorily answered him. You believe the sun will rise because it always has, but that reasoning assumes the future will resemble the past, which is the very thing you're trying to establish. Every attempt to justify induction uses induction, and the circle never closes. Picture the turkey fed every morning for 1,000 days. Its confidence in the pattern peaks precisely on the day before it's slaughtered. Every observation supported the theory. The theory was still fatally wrong. Here's the mechanic. No number of past instances logically entails the next one. Induction works spectacularly, but it works without justification. We rely on it constantly and cannot ground it, which means the entire edifice of empirical knowledge rests on a habit rather than a proof. This is why the problem matters practically rather than just logically. Your confidence in any pattern is a function of repetition, and repetition is exactly what a turkey has. Ask where you're most confident because of a long, unbroken streak. That's your blind spot. The past is the only evidence you have about the future, and it guarantees nothing. Hume's guillotine. Hume noticed a leap that nearly every moral argument makes and none can justify. You cannot derive a statement about what ought to be from statements about what is. Facts describe, values prescribe, and no pile of descriptions produces a prescription without smuggling in a value you didn't declare. Picture the arguments you've heard that run on this move. It's natural, therefore it's right. It's traditional, therefore it should continue. This is how it's always been done. Everyone does it. Each takes a fact and slides silently into a duty, and the slide happens in a place nobody looks. Here's the mechanic. The hidden premise is always a value. Natural things are good. Tradition should be preserved. Once it's stated openly, it can be examined and often collapses. Left unstated, it does its work invisibly. This is why the guillotine is such a useful blade to carry. It doesn't tell you what's right. It reveals where an argument quietly assumed it. When someone argues from how things are to how they should be, find the value they didn't mention. Nature has no opinions. Everyone claiming otherwise is inserting their own. The bundle theory of self. Hume went looking for himself with unusual rigor and reported back that he couldn't find anything. Whenever he introspected, he found only perceptions, a sensation, a thought, an emotion, another thought, in constant succession. Never once did he encounter the self having them. So he concluded, there isn't one. You're a bundle of perceptions, held together by nothing but their rapid sequence. Picture the self as a nation. It has a name, a history, borders, apparent continuity. Look for the thing itself, and you find only people, land, laws, and institutions in flux. The nation is a useful summary of parts, not an extra entity alongside them. Here's the mechanic. Continuity of memory plus a coherent narrative produces the powerful sense of a single occupant. But narratives are compiled, not discovered, and the compiler is itself part of the bundle. This is why it converges with anatta from a completely different tradition. Two separate philosophical projects, looking honestly, found the same absence. Watch your experience for 60 seconds and try to locate the one having it. There's no captain, there's just a very convincing crew. Occam's razor. The principle is simple. When explanations compete, prefer the one requiring fewer assumptions. Not because simple is always true, but because every added assumption is another place to be wrong, and elaborate theories can be built to fit anything after the fact. Picture the last time someone didn't reply to your message. Your mind likely built a story. They're annoyed, they're reconsidering the friendship, they read it and chose silence. That theory requires several assumptions about another person's inner life. The competing theory requires one. They were busy. Here's the mechanic. Anxiety and ego are both complexity generators. Anxiety builds threat-shaped explanations. Ego builds explanations where you're the central character. Both produce baroque theories that feel like insight and function as invention. This is why the razor is a psychological tool as much as a scientific one. Most of what you suffer over is a complicated story competing with a boring one, and the boring one is usually right. When you catch yourself constructing an elaborate explanation, state the simplest one and test it first. The simplest story is usually true and almost never flattering enough to be interesting. The Gettier problem. For centuries, knowledge was defined as justified true belief. Gettier destroyed it in 3 pages. Consider, you look at a clock showing 3 o'clock and form the belief that it's 3 o'clock. It is, in fact, 3 o'clock. But the clock stopped 24 hours ago. Your belief is true, and you had good reason for it, and you clearly didn't know. Picture how often this is your actual situation. You reach a correct conclusion through faulty reasoning, or on the basis of a source that happened to be right by luck. The output is indistinguishable from knowledge, from the inside. Here's the mechanic. Correctness and understanding come apart. You can be right for bad reasons and wrong for good ones, and you cannot tell which case you're in by examining how confident you feel, because confidence tracks neither. This is why outcomes are terrible feedback for reasoning. A correct prediction from broken logic teaches you to trust broken logic, and you'll use it again on a day when the clock is moving. When you're right, check why. A correct answer from bad reasoning is a debt, not a win. Being right and knowing are 2 different things, and only one of them repeats. Language games. Wittgenstein spent his early career arguing that language pictures reality, then spent his later career dismantling his own position. His replacement idea: words don't have fixed meanings attached to them. They have uses, and those uses only make sense inside a particular activity with particular rules. He called these language games. The word game itself is his example. Board games, war games, the Olympics, flirtation. No single feature is common to all, just overlapping resemblances. Picture 2 people arguing about freedom or love or fairness, each certain the other is being obtuse. They're often not disagreeing about the world. They're using the same token in two different games and mistaking a rules mismatch for a conflict of belief. Here's the mechanic. Meaning is public and practical, not private and definitional. Ask not what a word means, but what it's doing here, in this activity, between these people. This is why so many disputes cannot be resolved by argument. They need translation first. In your next disagreement, ask how the other person is using the key word before defending your position. Half of all conflict is two people playing different games with the same words. The beetle in the box. Wittgenstein imagines everyone carrying a box. Each person calls what's inside a beetle. No one can look into anyone else's box. The word beetle still functions perfectly in conversation. Everyone uses it consistently, agrees on when to say it, builds a whole vocabulary around it, and the contents could be entirely different in every box. Or some boxes could be empty, and nothing in the language would change. Picture the word pain. You learned it from external cues, injuries, expressions, other people's behavior. You've never compared your inner sensation to anyone else's. The word works because of shared usage, not shared contents. Here's the mechanic. Private experience does no work in public language. Whatever is in your box is irrelevant to how the word operates, which means the vocabulary of inner life may be far emptier of shared content than it feels. This is why it's unnerving rather than merely clever. You've assumed a lifetime of mutual understanding, and the agreement may be entirely about behavior. Assume less shared understanding than the smoothness of conversation suggests. You've been talking about your beetle for years. Nobody has ever seen it. Whereof one cannot speak. Wittgenstein ends his first book with a sentence that reads like a door closing. Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. His argument was that language can only meaningfully describe facts about the world. The things people most want to discuss, ethics, beauty, meaning, the reason there's anything at all, aren't facts within the world. They're conditions of it, and language cannot get behind them. Picture trying to state why cruelty is wrong in a way that's factually verifiable, or what makes a piece of music devastating. You can gesture, compare, describe effects. The thing itself stays outside the sentence. Here's the mechanic. He wasn't dismissing those subjects as nonsense in the insulting sense. He thought they were the most important things there are, and that our tools are the wrong shape for them. The failure is in the medium, not the subject. This is why he added that what cannot be spoken can still be shown, in how a life is lived, in art, in silence. Notice what you keep trying to argue into words. Try demonstrating it instead. The most important things in your life will be shown, never stated. ZENO'S paradoxes. To cross a room, you must first cross half of it, then half the remainder, then half of that. Since there are infinitely many halves, you must complete infinitely many tasks, which cannot be done in finite time. Therefore, you can never arrive. You are, however, sitting somewhere, having arrived. So something in that argument is broken, and finding it took over 2,000 years. Picture the argument's structure. Every step is individually plausible. The conclusion is flatly false. That combination is the most valuable thing in philosophy, because it proves a hidden assumption exists and forces you to hunt it. Here's the mechanic. The flaw involves how infinite series behave and how mathematically dividing a distance differs from physically traversing it. Calculus eventually gave tools for summing infinite series to finite totals. This is why the paradoxes were productive rather than merely puzzling. A valid-seeming argument for an obviously false conclusion is an alarm that your concepts are wrong somewhere. When sound reasoning delivers an absurd result, hunt the assumption instead of accepting the conclusion. Reality doesn't have to defend itself against your logic. Your logic has to explain reality. Pascal's wager. Pascal argued that belief in God is a bet and computed the payoffs. If you believe and you're right, infinite gain. If you believe and you're wrong, you lost a little. If you disbelieve and you're right, small gain. If you disbelieve and you're wrong, infinite loss. So believe. The argument has famous holes. Which God? Can belief be chosen deliberately? Would a deity reward a hedge? But the underlying move is what survives, and it's useful everywhere. When you cannot know the truth, you can still reason about the asymmetry of outcomes. Picture a decision where being wrong in one direction is recoverable, and wrong in the other is catastrophic. Insurance, safety margins, the doctor's visit you keep postponing. You'll never have certainty. You can still see that the losses aren't symmetrical. Here's the mechanic. Most people optimize for likely outcomes and ignore the shape of the tails. Pascal's structure asks what happens if you're wrong, not just what's probable. Before deciding under uncertainty, compare the cost of being wrong in each direction. You'll rarely know the odds. You can almost always see which mistake you couldn't survive. The teleporter problem. A teleporter scans every atom of your body, destroys the original, and reassembles a perfect copy on Mars. Same memories, same personality, same continuous sense of self. The copy wakes up certain it walked in. Would you use it? Most people hesitate, and the hesitation matters. Picture the copy on Mars. It remembers deciding to step in. It feels entirely like you. From its perspective, teleportation works. From your perspective on Earth, you were disassembled and something else woke up wearing your life. Here's the mechanic. If you object, you believe something more than pattern and continuity is required for identity, and you have to say what. If you don't object, then you've accepted that you are a pattern rather than a specific piece of matter, which means dying and being copied is survival. This is why it's such an effective trap. Both answers commit you to something strange, and there's no comfortable middle. Notice which answer you gave instinctively, then examine what it commits you to believing. You are either a pattern or a substance. Neither answer is as safe as you'd like. The repugnant conclusion. Parfit followed a plausible moral principle to a conclusion nearly everyone rejects, and then couldn't find the error. Start with a reasonable idea. More total well-being is better. Now compare a world of 10 billion people with excellent lives to a world of 100 trillion people whose lives are barely worth living. Multiply out the total, and the second world wins. Repeat the logic, and you arrive at a vast population in near total mediocrity being the best possible outcome. Picture that world. Almost nobody accepts it, and almost nobody can identify which step was wrong. Here's the mechanic. This is what a genuine paradox looks like in ethics. Not an argument you can refute, but a valid chain from acceptable premises to an unacceptable end. Decades of work have gone into escaping it, and no escape is widely agreed upon. This is why it matters even if you'll never do population ethics. It demonstrates that moral intuitions and moral principles can diverge irreconcilably, and that you should distrust any system claiming to have resolved everything. Hold your ethical frameworks as tools, not proofs. Every one of them breaks somewhere. Any moral principle followed far enough leads somewhere you refuse to go. NEWCOMB'S paradox. 2 boxes. Box A holds $1,000, visible. Box B holds either $1 million or nothing. A predictor who has been right about everyone so far has already decided. If it predicted you'd take only B, it put $1 million in. If it predicted you'd take both, it left B empty. Take both or take only B? Argument 1. The money is already placed. Nothing you do now changes it. Taking both dominates, since you get whatever's in B plus a guaranteed 1,000. Argument 2. Everyone who took both got 1,000. Everyone who took only B got $1 million. The evidence is overwhelming. Both arguments are airtight. Decision theorists remain split. seriously and permanently. Picture the discomfort. This isn't a trick question with a hidden answer. It's a case where two valid principles of rational choice give opposite instructions. Here's the mechanic. It exposes a fault line between causal reasoning and evidential reasoning and reveals that being rational is not one unified procedure. When two sound principles conflict, recognize you're choosing between frameworks, not calculating an answer. Rationality is not a single thing. Sometimes it argues with itself and doesn't stop. The sublime. Burke and Kant separated beauty from something stronger. Beauty is pleasing and comfortable. The sublime is overwhelming, and its pleasure is mixed with terror. Standing at a cliff edge, watching a storm, looking up at a mountain or a night sky that makes you feel deleted. You're not comfortable. You're something better than comfortable. Picture the feeling. There's fear in it, and awe, and a strange elation. Kant's explanation is that the sublime arises when something exceeds your capacity to grasp it. You confront your own smallness, and then, remarkably, feel expanded rather than crushed. Here's the mechanic. The sublime requires safety plus scale. The storm must be witnessed, not survived. Under those conditions, the mind's failure to contain what it's seeing becomes exhilarating rather than threatening, and something in you recognizes that it can hold the idea of what it cannot hold. This is why people seek it deliberately. Modern life is engineered for comfort and delivers very little sublimity, which is a real deprivation. Put yourself in front of something genuinely vast this month. Let it overwhelm you. You need to feel small sometimes. Comfort will never give you that. The Owl of Minerva. Hegel wrote that the owl of Minerva takes flight only at dusk. Philosophy, he meant, only understands an age once that age is ending. You cannot comprehend a period while inside it. The assumptions are invisible, the significance of events unclear, the shape of the whole unavailable. Clarity comes retrospectively, when it's too late to act on it. Picture the chapters of your own life. Each one only made sense afterward. The relationship whose meaning became clear after it ended. The job whose purpose emerged years later. The struggle that revealed itself as formative once it was over. Here's the mechanic. Understanding requires perspective, and perspective requires distance. Inside an experience, you have data and no frame. The frame arrives with the ending, which is exactly when it's least useful for choosing. This is why demanding clarity before acting is a trap. You will be deciding without comprehension for your entire life, because comprehension is structurally late. Stop waiting to understand your situation before acting in it. You'll understand it later. Wisdom about your life arrives after your life needed it. Act anyway. The master-slave dialectic. Hegel's analysis contains a reversal nobody expects. Two people meet, each needing recognition from the other. A struggle follows. One submits and becomes servant, one dominates and becomes master. Then it inverts. The master, having stopped working, becomes dependent on the servant for everything, including for the recognition that makes him a master. The servant, meanwhile, engages directly with the world, develops skill, transforms material, and grows. The master consumes and stagnates. Picture any relationship built on control. The controller becomes reliant on the controlled for their identity. Take away the person who defers, and the dominant one loses the role entirely. Their power is a description of somebody else's behavior. Here's the mechanic. Recognition cannot be extracted. Forced acknowledgement is worthless precisely because it was forced, so the master needs something he has destroyed the conditions for. Meanwhile, the servant is doing the work that develops a self. This is why the analysis is so subversive. The apparent winner is the trapped one. Look for where your position depends entirely on someone else's compliance. Whoever needs the deference is the one who isn't free. The end of history. Fukuyama argued in 1989 that history, understood as the contest between systems of governance, had reached its conclusion. Liberal democracy had no remaining serious rival. Events would continue. The argument was finished. Then the following decades happened, and the thesis became the most cited example of intellectual overconfidence in modern memory. Picture the psychology of the claim. It arrives at every apparent summit. Every era with unmatched dominance concludes that the pattern of change has stopped, that this arrangement is not one more stage, but the final form. Here's the mechanic. The end of history illusion operates on individuals too. At every age, people acknowledge they changed enormously in the past and believe they've now essentially finished. Then they change again and repeat the same belief. This is why the idea belongs on any list of dangerous ones. Not because Fukuyama was uniquely wrong, but because the error is the default setting of any mind sitting at what feels like an endpoint. Assume your current arrangement, personal or political, is a stage rather than a conclusion. Every age believes it's the last one. Every age has been wrong so far. The tragedy of the commons. A shared pasture. Each herder gains fully by adding one more animal, while the cost of overgrazing is spread across everyone. So each rationally adds animals, and the pasture is destroyed, and everyone loses. No villain required, no stupidity required. Just individually sensible decisions summing to collective ruin. Picture the shared resources in your own life. The office kitchen nobody cleans, the road everyone drives on, the atmosphere, the group project. In each case, the individual benefit of taking is concentrated and the cost of depletion is diluted. Here's the mechanic. The structure inverts incentives. Restraint is punished, since the person who holds back simply gets less, while the resource depletes anyway. So even people who see the outcome coming participate, because unilateral virtue changes nothing. This is why it can't be solved by appeals to conscience alone. It needs structure, agreements, enforcement, ownership, or norms strong enough to change what individual rationality recommends. When you see a shared resource degrading, look at the incentives before blaming the people. Everyone behaving reasonably is fully sufficient to destroy something everyone needs. Plato's chariot. Plato pictures the soul as a chariot with two horses and a driver. The driver is reason. One horse is noble, drawn toward honor and the good. The other is unruly, driven by appetite, and it pulls hard. The driver doesn't own the horses. He negotiates with them, and on bad days, he's simply taken along. Picture your last failure of self-control. Reason was present the whole time, arguing, being overruled. That's the image exactly. A driver with reins and insufficient strength. Here's the mechanic. This isn't a model of reason versus emotion, which is the version people usually inherit. There are three parties, and the noble horse is essential. Reason alone cannot move the chariot at all. It has no motive power. It steers, and it needs the horses to go anywhere. This is why pure rationality fails as a life strategy. You don't need less passion. You need your ambition and your desires harnessed rather than suppressed or obeyed. Stop trying to eliminate the unruly horse. Get better reins and give the noble one a direction. Reason can't pull the chariot. It can only decide where the horses take you. Ubuntu. Southern African philosophy contains a formulation that inverts the Western starting point. Umuntu, ngumuntu, ngabantu. A person is a person through other persons. Descartes began with an isolated thinking self and tried to build outward to other people. Ubuntu begins with relationship and derives the individual from it. You are not a self that then enters society. You are constituted by your relationships, and personhood is something achieved through them, not possessed alone. Picture removing every relationship from your life, not just the people, but the language they gave you, the concepts, the values, the sense of who you are that only exists in contrast and in company. There's very little left to call an individual. Here's the mechanic. Individualism treats the self as prior and connection as optional. Ubuntu treats connection as the material the self is made from, which makes cruelty a form of self-harm rather than merely a wrong done to another. This is why it produces a different ethics rather than just a warmer one. Your flourishing isn't separable from the flourishing of the people around you. Treat one relationship this week as part of who you are, not as something you have. You didn't become yourself alone, and you can't be yourself alone. To philosophize is to learn how to die. Montaigne borrowed the line from Cicero and made it the center of his work. All of it, every argument and idea in this entire list, is preparation for one event. Not because death is the subject, but because a mind that has genuinely reckoned with its own ending relates differently to everything else. Fear loses its grip. Trivialities lose their claim. The question of how to spend a day becomes serious. Picture having thought all of this through, actually integrated it. The self as a process, the universe as silent, your freedom as inescapable, and your time as finite. The person who holds all of that isn't gloomy. They're awake and very hard to manipulate. Here's the mechanic. Philosophy isn't information, it's practice, and the exam is administered once, without warning. Everything you've considered here either changes how you lived before then, or it was entertainment. This is why the ancients treated it as training rather than study. The point was never to know things. It was to be a certain kind of person when it counted. Pick the one idea from all of this that unsettled you most. Live differently because of it this week. You will die. Everything on this list is about what you do with the time in between.